know with all the lung infections I keep getting, and I'm getting more and more resistant to antibiotics, and I hear it's called antimicrobial resistance, or is it AMR? What do you know about it? Can you tell me more?
Yeah, I can. From my understanding, there's a few things. So people have heard of antibiotic resistance, which is when antibiotics aren't working, but there's a whole term called antimicrobial resistance, because it's not just bacteria that are resistant to treatments, but there's also funguses and viruses and parasites. And so that's all of those types of treatments are bundled into antimicrobial resistance, because we need to kill the microbes or the bugs. And the real issue is that there's not new antibiotics being produced, and so we end up with antimicrobial resistance. And for people with chronic illnesses like you and me, that becomes a real problem, because as you know, every time you have an antibiotic course, there's a chance that you won't be able to use those antibiotics anymore, and then there's nothing else.
As someone with cystic fibrosis, I'm really worried that there's not going to be antibiotics available to us. What's going to happen in the future? What's your thoughts about it?
I've got the same problem. I mean, having lived with CF my whole life as well, and had too many courses of antibiotics to count, and I think that means that antibiotics are becoming less useful, and that's really worrying, because when there's no antibiotics, then what happens? You just get uncontrolled infections, and instead of being in hospital for a week or 2 weeks, then you're in hospital for 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
I've heard about phage therapy as an alternative treatment, and I know it's been around since the 1900s in Eastern Europe. How are we going to use it as a treatment here in the Western world?
Well, you're right. I mean, phage therapy has been around for a long time, but we haven't needed to use phage therapy. And in fact, antibiotics have worked so well that we've really been able to just continue on with that and treat all the really bad infections. With antibiotics becoming less and less useful in some ways, or the fact that they're not less useful, but we don't have new ones, I think AMR is becoming a really big issue in the population. And I think it's really urgent that we find new ways of finding treatments for infections.
Mitch, what do you know about phage therapy and how it works now in the modern world?
As I think you know, I'm a member of Start Phage WA, which is a group of people trying to bring phage therapy here to Western Australia. And phages are things that are natural. They're viruses that are found in water sources, so they're found in lakes and rivers throughout the environment, and even you can find them in breast milk. So they're really everywhere. So phage therapy is about finding those viruses and checking to see that particular bacteria phage will treat or kill a particular infection. And then what they have to do is take those phages and they synthesize that in a lab. Yeah, and I don't know anything about all the lab stuff, because that's way above my pay grade and my brain. But they work out which phages will work on which bacteria, will kill which bacteria. They then put all those phages into a library. And so in the future, when somebody has a particular infection, hopefully they go to that phage library, find the right phage, and then they can synthesize that phage into a medicine and use that medicine.
So how are phages given to the patients?
There's all sorts of ways that phages are given. I mean, in the same way that our regular treatments are given in all sorts of ways. So phage therapy could be given through inhalation. Phage therapy could be put into a gel, and for instance, with burns, they could put it on the burn, and also you could have it intravenously in the same way that you have antibiotics intravenously.
It sounds like a promising treatment option. How is it we're going to get this all available to people that need it?
So in Australia, work is really well underway in bringing phages to the population, and in fact we've got a national protocol, and that protocol allows us to be able to use phages for people on a compassionate basis. And for those people are people who there is no other option available to them. Luckily, we have actually been able to treat some people in Melbourne and Sydney, and that treatment's been successful. So those people have gone from having no options to potentially being able to become better. The second thing we need to do is we have to keep building the library. So there are millions of bacteria and there are probably millions of phages, and at the moment we have about 3,500 phages in the library at the Wellyon Respiratory Centre. So we've got to keep building out that library and growing our knowledge about what those are. And then, of course, the third part is we need to actually be able to manufacture a phage in a way that's safe to give to people. And the really exciting thing there is there is the ability to create a manufacturing facility here in Western Australia that's just been underway. The development is just underway now.
How long do you think it'll be until phage therapy is available to people that need it?
I think it's going to be a number of years before we have phage therapy available as a general treatment to the population. However, we are moving forward, and one of the good things is we have got the STAMP protocol, which gives people access when they really desperately need it on a compassionate basis. But I think one of the really good things is we've got state and Commonwealth governments really interested in this and seeing that this is something that we need to work on for the future of the health of the whole population.
It's so good to hear what's being done in this space. Where do I go to hear about more information about phage therapy?
Well, you can find more information if you go to the telethonkids.org.au website and you search Phage WA. That's the easiest way to find new information, and that page will be continually updated with new information.
Thanks, Mitch.
No problem. It's always good to have a chat about stuff like that, especially when it means so much to both of us.